If you clicked on this video, you probably already know that bread has a reputation, a bad one. Doctors warn you about it. Nutrition labels make it look like a ticking clock sitting on your breakfast plate. And if you've been managing blood sugar for any length of time, you've almost certainly been told at some point by someone who seemed very confident that bread is the enemy, that it has to go, that every slice you eat is quietly doing damage you can't feel until it's too late. I want you to hold that thought for a second, because I'm going to show you that the real picture is a lot more nuanced than that. And more importantly, I'm going to show you that for people over 60 managing diabetes or elevated blood sugar, the type of bread you eat and the way you eat it may matter far more than whether you eat it at all. You've probably felt the frustration of standing in the bread aisle, turning packages over, reading numbers you don't fully understand, and walking away either empty-handed and hungry or guilty about the loaf in your cart. Maybe you've had a meal that felt innocent enough, a couple of slices with butter, maybe a thin layer of jam, and then felt that heavy, foggy feeling 2 hours later that you've learnt to associate with your blood sugar, doing something it shouldn't, that tiredness that settles into your eyes, the way your concentration goes soft, the sense that your body is working against you, even when you thought you were being careful. If that sounds familiar, you're not imagining it. But here's the thing, you may have been blaming the wrong ingredient entirely. Because the bread itself is not the problem. The molecular structure of the bread is the problem, and that's a distinction that changes everything. Before I go any further, there is something you need to know. At the end of this video, I'm going to tell you something about blood sugar that surprises nearly everyone who hears it. Something about the way your own body responds to carbohydrates that runs completely backward from what you've been taught. A biological paradox that explains why some of the most well-intentioned dietary advice for seniors with diabetes has been making things harder, not easier. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we go through everything today, because it will all click into place by the end. I've spent hundreds of hours going through peer-reviewed research, clinical trial data, and nutritional biochemistry literature to put together what I'm going to share with you today. I've looked at how different bread structures affect glucose metabolism, specifically in adults over 60, because the way a 65-year-old body processes carbohydrates is not the same as the way a 35-year-old body does. Insulin sensitivity changes. The speed of gastric emptying slows. The gut microbiome shifts. All of these factors matter enormously when we're talking about which foods cause dangerous spikes and which ones feed your body steadily and safely. I didn't want to give you generic advice that ignores the biology of your actual age, so everything I'm sharing today is filtered through that specific lens. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called the glucose paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Let's start with a piece of science that most bread labels will never tell you, because bread companies aren't required to disclose it. And frankly, most of them benefit from your confusion. When wheat is milled into the refined white flour that fills the majority of supermarket loaves, the grain is stripped of its bran layer and its germ, the two parts of the kernel that contain the bulk of the fiber, the minerals, and the enzymes that regulate how quickly starch is broken down into glucose in your bloodstream. What you're left with is essentially a delivery vehicle for pure, rapidly digestible starch. Your digestive enzymes hit it fast, your small intestine absorbs it fast, and your blood sugar rises fast. For a younger body with robust insulin production and high insulin sensitivity, this spike may be manageable. For a body that is older, that has been dealing with elevated blood sugar for years, or that is running on reduced insulin efficiency, that spike is a genuine physiological stress that accumulates over time into real damage to blood vessels, nerves, kidneys, and the eyes. But here is what the research from 2025 and 2026 has been reinforcing with increasing clarity. The structural complexity of bread starch matters at least as much as whether the bread contains whole grain or not. Two loaves can both say whole grain on the label. One can cause a glycemic response nearly identical to white bread. The other can keep your blood sugar almost flat for hours. The difference lies inside the molecular architecture of the starch and the microbial or enzymatic history of the dough itself. And this is where three specific bread types become genuinely remarkable for seniors managing blood sugar. The first is sprouted grain bread, and I want to explain exactly why sprouting does what it does, because once you understand the mechanism, you'll never look at this bread the same way. When a grain is sprouted, meaning it is soaked in water until it begins to germinate and puts out a tiny shoot, a cascade of enzymatic activity is triggered inside the kernel. The grain, in biological terms, is trying to become a plant. To do that, it needs to break down its own stored starch into simple sugars the seedling can use for fuel. So it activates its own amylase enzymes, the very same type of enzyme your body uses to digest starch, and it begins pre-digesting itself. By the time the sprouted grain is harvested and dried and milled, or pressed into a loaf, a meaningful portion of its dense, rapidly digestible starch has already been converted and reorganized into forms that your body absorbs far more slowly. The glycemic index of sprouted grain bread consistently tests lower than even standard whole wheat bread in clinical comparisons, but there's more happening during germination than starch reduction. The sprouting process dramatically increases the bioavailability of B vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, folate, that are critical for glucose metabolism and neurological health, both of which are top concerns for seniors with diabetes. It also reduces phytic acid, a compound found in all grains that binds to minerals like zinc, magnesium, and iron, and prevents your body from absorbing them. Magnesium, in particular, plays a direct role in insulin receptor function. Multiple studies have found that people with low magnesium status have significantly higher rates of insulin resistance. Sprouting effectively unlocks the minerals your body needs to handle glucose properly. This is bread that works with your metabolic system rather than against it. The second category is true sourdough, and I need to emphasize the word true here, because most of what is labeled sourdough in American grocery stores is not actually sourdough in any meaningful biochemical sense. It's conventional bread with a small amount of vinegar or sourdough flavoring added to mimic the taste. Real sourdough is made through a slow fermentation process driven by a live starter culture containing wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria, the same family of beneficial bacteria you find in yogurt and fermented vegetables. This fermentation can take anywhere from 12 to 48 hours, and during that time, those bacteria are doing extraordinary things to the chemistry of the dough. The lactic acid and acetic acid produced during sourdough fermentation change the structure of the bread starch in two critical ways. First, they lower the pH of the dough, and this acidic environment causes the starch granules to become more resistant to rapid enzymatic digestion. Second, and perhaps more importantly, these acids slow gastric emptying, the rate at which food moves from your stomach into your small intestine. When gastric emptying is slower, glucose enters your bloodstream more gradually, and your body has more time to manage it with whatever insulin it can produce. In clinical studies comparing true long-fermented sourdough to standard whole wheat bread made with commercial yeast, the sourdough consistently produces a significantly lower and more gradual blood sugar response, even when the two loaves have nearly identical macronutrient profiles on paper. The process, not just the ingredients, determines the glycemic outcome. For seniors over 60, this is particularly significant because gastric emptying naturally slows with age anyway, but the type of food you eat can work with that slowing or against it. A rapidly digestible starch can still overwhelm even a slower-moving digestive system. A sourdough bread whose starch has been pre-acidified and partially broken down into resistant forms fits far more gently into the aging digestive process and produces a blood sugar curve that is smooth and manageable rather than sharp and destabilizing. The third bread I want to walk you through is one that most Americans are less familiar with, but that nutritional researchers have been pointing to for years as one of the most genuinely diabetes-friendly grain foods available: traditional pumpernickel. Not the soft, sliced pumpernickel you sometimes find in American delicatessens. That product is often made with refined rye flour and colored with molasses, to mimic pumpernickel's dark appearance. I'm talking about authentic German-style pumpernickel, made with coarsely ground whole rye berries and baked at a very low temperature, often around 250 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, for an extraordinarily long time, sometimes 16 to 24 hours. This slow steam-baked process is called Maillard cooking at low temperatures, and it produces a loaf with a completely unique internal structure. Rye grain has a very different starch composition from wheat. It contains a high proportion of a type of fiber called arabinoxylon, which forms a viscous gel in your digestive tract. This gel physically slows the movement of digested material through your gut, limiting how quickly glucose can pass through the intestinal wall into your bloodstream. Rye also contains compounds that directly improve insulin sensitivity at the cellular level by supporting the function of insulin receptors. Clinical data has shown that replacing even a portion of wheat bread consumption with rye-based whole grain bread over a period of several weeks can produce measurable improvements in fasting blood glucose and insulin sensitivity scores in adults with type 2 diabetes. The slow baking process of traditional pumpernickel preserves these compounds while creating a starch structure that is highly resistant to rapid breakdown, resistant enough that some of it passes through the small intestine entirely undigested and feeds beneficial gut bacteria in the colon instead, functioning essentially as a prebiotic rather than a blood sugar driver. Now, knowing which breads to choose is powerful, but it's only half of the picture, because even the most blood sugar-friendly loaf in the world can cause a problematic glucose spike if you eat it in a way that ignores the biochemistry of how your body handles food in combination. The what matters enormously, but the how and the when matter just as much. The first rule of bread eating for blood sugar management is a simple one that dramatically changes your body's glucose response. And it costs you nothing to implement, starting with your very next meal. Never eat bread alone. This isn't about willpower or portion discipline, it's about digestive chemistry. When you eat starch by itself, without fat or protein present in the same meal, your digestive system processes it as a priority fuel source with nothing to slow it down. The starch is broken into glucose quickly, and that glucose crosses the intestinal wall and hits your bloodstream rapidly. But when you eat bread alongside a meaningful amount of protein and healthy fat, 2 eggs cooked in olive oil, or half an avocado, or a few slices of good cheese, something very different happens in your stomach. Fat slows gastric emptying dramatically. Protein blunts the insulin response by triggering a competing hormonal signal. Together, they transform bread from a fast fuel into a slow fuel, spreading out its glycemic impact over a much longer window and preventing the sharp spike and crash cycle that leaves you foggy and exhausted. This combination effect has been studied specifically in older adults with insulin resistance, and the results are consistently striking. The same 2 slices of bread eaten with eggs and avocado produce a peak blood sugar reading roughly 40 to 50% lower than the same bread eaten alone with just butter. The bread hasn't changed, the starch content hasn't changed. What's changed is the metabolic context in which your body encounters that starch. Think of it like adding a speed bump to a highway. The car, which is glucose, is still going to get where it's going, but it's going to get there more slowly, and your body is going to have time to manage the traffic. The second guideline is about portion, and here the research is unambiguous. For seniors managing blood sugar, 1 to 2 slices of even the best bread per meal represents a manageable carbohydrate load when combined with protein and fat. 3 or more slices, even of sprouted grain or true sourdough, can overwhelm the system's ability to respond smoothly, particularly in the afternoon and evening, when insulin sensitivity typically declines. The goal is not deprivation, it is precision. 2 slices of genuine pumpernickel with 2 eggs and half an avocado is a breakfast that will keep your blood sugar stable for 3 to 4 hours. It's satisfying, it's nutritious, and it works with your biology. There is no reason to go hungry. There is every reason to be strategic. The third guideline involves timing, and this one surprises many people when they first hear it. But the biological logic is airtight. Your body's ability to manage glucose efficiently follows a daily rhythm tied to your circadian clock. In the morning, after a night of fasting, your cells are at their most insulin sensitive, The muscles that absorb glucose for energy are primed and ready. The liver's blood sugar regulation is tuned and responsive. This means that the same slice of bread eaten at 7 in the morning will produce a significantly lower and more controlled blood sugar response than the exact same slice eaten at 7 in the evening. When insulin sensitivity has dropped and your digestive metabolism is already slowing in preparation for sleep. Multiple clinical trials have confirmed this circadian glucose pattern in adults over 60, finding that carbohydrate tolerance is measurably and consistently higher in the morning hours and at midday than in the late afternoon or evening. This doesn't mean you can never have bread at dinner. It means that if blood sugar management is a priority for you, and if you're watching this video, it probably is, front-loading your bread consumption to breakfast and lunch gives your body the best possible conditions to handle it gracefully. Save your evenings for lower carbohydrate options, grilled fish and vegetables, a bowl of lentil soup, a salad with olive oil and good protein. Your morning and midday metabolism are your allies. Use them. There's something important I want to come back to before we close, because it ties together everything I've shared today. Managing blood sugar as a senior is not about eating less or enjoying food less. It is about understanding the biology of your body at this stage of life and making choices that align with how that biology actually works. The grain structure that determines starch digestibility, the fermentation chemistry that transforms a loaf of bread into something your body can handle with ease, the combination of macronutrients that turns a potentially destabilizing food into a stable, sustained source of energy, the timing that puts carbohydrates into your system when your body is best equipped to handle them. These are not restrictions, they are tools, and they are available to you starting today, with your very next grocery run, with the next meal you prepare in your own kitchen. You started this video feeling like bread might be something you've lost, or something you have to feel guilty about, or something that sits between you and your health goals, like an obstacle that can't be moved. I hope that by now you can see it differently. The right bread, eaten the right way, at the right time, is not your enemy. For many seniors who have made these specific switches and applied these 3 simple guidelines, it has become one of the most sustainable and satisfying changes in their entire dietary approach, because it gives back something they thought they had to give up. And it does it not through willpower alone, but through understanding. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar. Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called The Glucose Paradox, and inside, you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free, you can download it in a second, and it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.